Welcome back, tributes, to episode 72 of Into the Arena. I'm Holly,
I'm Emily.
and we are back for one of our final episodes before we get to the Ballad movie, the release of the Ballad movie on November 17th. So it's creeping up, and we wanted to talk about part one. We wanted to break down the entire book and talk about it. But before we dive into part one, we have some announcements. Like always, join us for Tribute Talk on Thursdays at 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern. There's a lot to talk about now that we're getting so close to the movie coming out. So definitely stay tuned for those episodes. And the lives are so fun. They're getting more interactive and it's getting to be so much fun. So join us for that. And then turn on our notifications for our YouTube and Instagram because, like I said, we're getting close and there's a lot of content being released. So stay up to date. And then last final things. These are kind of just fun things. So merch is now being able to be found at Hot Topic or Box Lunch. So that's pretty exciting. Or obviously the Lionsgate shop as well. But we are starting to see our first actual Ballad merch. We
Yeah.
got the Academy pins, the bags. So if you're
That
looking for
crossbody,
merch,
I'm so excited to get one of those.
oh, and you probably have cosplays. Like everyone's working on their Academy cosplays, so we got to get that. So very exciting. And then finally, Emily is about to leave literally in a couple hours for the airport to go to New York, you crazy person, because she will be attending New York City Comic Con. And this is obviously before everything happens at New York City Comic Con, but we're wishing you all the best and we can't wait to see all the amazing content. So, like I said, stay up to date with us and let's dive into this Ballad episode. People have been saying, oh my gosh, the movie is approaching so quickly. I don't want to reread or go back and reread. I may not have the time to fully invest in it. So this is going to be us kind of like breaking down the book, talking about it, kind of giving y'all a refresher just in case, but hopefully read the book and then use this to kind of support you getting ready for the movie. So we have 3 parts to this series. This one is part 1, The Mentor.
I love that we're doing this too because I definitely didn't plan on doing a reread. I was like, I don't have
Mhm.
time to do a reread. This is a really good way for us to do it. We're forcing ourselves.
Yeah. So we begin with Coriolanus cooking cabbage on the stove, and that begins on the day of the reaping. Dun dun dun. That was our introduction to him. And then it goes all the way down to Lucy Gray saying, "You better count me in because I am not going down without a fight." So that's what we have to cover tonight.
I have to say that that opening line, I absolutely love it. Every single time I read it, it just makes me laugh. Like
hmm
it just tells you who Corio is like right away. He's so funny. He's so dramatic, but he's also being
Yes.
serious, which
Yes.
I just can't wait to see Tom portray in the film.
And just that cockiness. This is when we're first in chapter 1 introduced to Snowlands on Top, which I mean, he has Tigress saying it. It's like a whole family mantra thing is Snowlands on Top. Even though it's the family name, it's almost like it's directed at him. And I feel like it's very much
When
selfish.
Coriolanus is president.
Yeah.
I'm cosplaying at Comic-Con, Grand Ma'am. So like
Can't
hopefully
wait
this
to
picture
see
is from
it.
that.
Yes, you have to take the iconic like standby with the where she's handing him the rose, like looking at the
Yeah, I got a
rose.
yellow rose to hold. So
Good.
hopefully that turns into something.
And then we find out that the reaping is on July 4th, which
hmm
is a callback as well. And I guess one of my favorite lines out of all of Ballad takes place in part 1 and actually at the beginning is people had short memories, because I feel like that's a link to Plutarch and his final speech with Katniss in Mockingjay. People are fickle, stupid beings, and that's what that reminded me of. We also learned that there's a mentorship program. He gets the District 12 female tribute, Lucy Gray Baird. So
hmm
we're introduced to her.
Then we get the reaping.
Mhm.
So we meet Lucy Gray for the very first time, our District 12 girl.
Queen, yes.
I keep forgetting that Maud Ivory is the one who kicks off the singing at the Reaping. It's not actually a planned
Yeah.
thing by Lucy Gray. So I wonder if they're going to do that way in the film or how that's going to pan out. But I kind of keep thinking that Lucy Gray is like having this plan for the Reaping and like goes
Mhm.
up there to sing, but her plan is really the snake incident with Mayfair,
Mhm.
not so much the singing part.
And that's the huge part, is learning that the reaping could be rigged or is rigged because Mayor Mayfair chooses Lucy Gray's name because of her history with his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So we learn that the reapings can be rigged, which I think
Yeah, which
is
is like
a
actually
huge
pointed
thing.
out specifically by Sejanus saying that, oh, it's probably rigged, which
Hmm.
I feel like created a lot of doors like opening for fan theories to just run rampant if there's
Hmm.
rigged reapings like confirmed.
Definitely. Especially coming down to Katniss. I mean, we talked about Katniss and the poll with
Hmm.
Plutarch and everything. It could be a situation like that. And it was so interesting. We get to meet Lucy Gray and see how colorful she is. I think that's another addition that was really fascinating to me, was how colorful she's mentioned to be, and then how drab the capital actually is. But down the line, that's not the case. And then we kind of learned that Corio is out for survival. Like, he is just barely making it by. And so he ends up going to visit Lucy Gray at the zoo and then gets a demerit. And so he realizes that, oh no, I have to keep in line in order to maintain my place as a mentor because he needs to get into the academy.
I love that chapter ending where he gets a demerit and like is afraid of potentially getting more because he might be expelled. And I think
Hmm.
it's come up a few times that wow, this is kind of a weak chapter ending in comparison to like the original trilogy, but I feel like
Hmm.
it's so purposeful there because Suzanne wants us to see how privileged he is and like to him that is a original series level chapter ending, right? It's like
Hmm.
so serious to him, but it's really not much in comparison, like we as readers know.
Because that becomes his whole point for survival. And he is like Katniss in a huge part of the sense that he relies on self-preservation and has to be constantly surviving and keeping this appearance versus reality sort of lens on looking rich and being with the upper class. And then it's so interesting because we start to get into, in part one of my, I think at first I was like weirded out by this element, but now it's starting to make more sense as they're kind of doing promo for the movie, is the connection to animals and all, and the tributes, and how Suzanne Collins compares them consistently, like circus and them being in the zoo and physically being
Hmm.
treated
I feel like
like
that
animals.
starts a lot in chapter 3. Like for me, that was
Mhm.
the animal references chapter.
Yeah.
It's really starts like when they bring them on the livestock cars, I think.
Hmm.
And then I mean then they go to a zoo and it's just I feel like is compounded a lot in that chapter in the way that we see them treated and see them talked about.
And it's so interesting because they also have to perform for their food as well. So when they're in
Mm,
the actual
it's like a
zoo, they're
circus.
literally, yeah, it's they're like circus animals performing for their food, which I think brings us to the end of chapter 6, which was hands down, like, to me, the part that started Ballad. It kicked it off with
Which
the
is
sentence.
Arachne?
Mhm.
Okay.
The sentence
I didn't
death.
even look, but I was like, it's got to be that, right?
It's got to be that part. It's iconic. In one movement, the tribute yanked Arachne forward and slit her throat. Like, I remember reading that for the first time and just being so excited.
I think it really picks up a lot of pace. And from that point on, we get Arachne, we get Clemencia and what happens with her, we get the
Mhm.
bombing in the arena. Like it's chaos.
It's just, I feel like so much of that tension is being built between chapters 1 and the end of 6, because we keep referring to the capital citizens as people, and then we dehumanize the tributes, and then Snow does this right in front of them. And like, obviously the capital does not take care of the tributes the way that we see in the 74th and the 75th games. And so we're seeing this completely different treatment of tributes in a completely different games than what we're used to. I think the movie is kind of making me feel a little bit better about how subtle they're being, because you can see the mistreatment and like the abuse of the tributes, but you don't see it in a way that is like in your face. Like you see them pushing Lucy Gray, and you see them handcuffed, and you see them behind the zoo bars.
I think that's why
But
Ballad is going to be such a great movie because it
mhm,
is going to get condensed. And I think condensed in the way that I feel like the book needed to be. So I'm
mhm.
looking forward to seeing that translation.
And then prior to Arachne's death, her and Corio and Clemencia were supposed to write a proposal paper for Dr. Gall, but obviously Arachne gets murdered, everything happens, and
Clemencia's like,
then
I can't work on a group project right now. What?
yeah,
Understandable.
exactly,
To
as
Gall,
one
not so
normally would.
much.
But who ends up doing the grunt work for the choreo? Who gets turned into a snake lizard mutt thing? Clemencia. Oh my goodness. But that's how chapter 7 ends, with Coriolanus had just begun to put two and two together when he saw the look of alarm on Clemencia's face. She yanked her hand from the tank, but not before a half dozen neon snakes sank their fangs into her flesh. Dun dun dun.
Yeah, that's definitely a Suzanne Collins chapter ending.
And I think what's so fun about rereading chapter 6 again is how blatantly like obvious and how smart Corio is throughout that entire interaction, because Dr. Gall is literally saying everything. Like she's telling them like, oh, watch out, the snakes can sense that your handprint was not on the paper. Like she's literally saying
Hmm.
this, and Corio is not lying, and he doesn't lie to her. He never lies. But I think that that's also another interesting part in chapter 6.
Yeah, I think going all the way back to chapter 4, I noticed a conversation more between Corio and Dean Highbottom and Dr. Gull. Like it stood out to me more that she really was very interested in Corio. And she talks to
Mm-hmm.
Dean Highbottom like right in front of Coriolanus. Like this one's promising. This one might be something, you know? And then says something about great things are happening with the reptiles or something like that. I don't know. There's just so much foreshadowing that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, how did I miss so many things the first
Mm-hmm.
time that I read through?
I think that's what's so great about this, is because I was rushing to find out like what was going to happen and what was the point of. I was like more looking at like the
Because it was
main,
so new. What is this? What is this going to be? How is this going to turn out? What is this new story?
and then only to miss all of these minor details, and then going back and then appreciating it because it builds towards the story more.
Hmm.
So it's just like this. If you've only read Ballad once, this is your reminder to go read it again, because there's so many great pieces of information in it.
I put little titles kind of for my chapter notes. In chapter 8, I said, no one is safe in bold because I feel like that's the moment where Corio really starts to freak out and realizes that even though he's a capital citizen, he's not entirely safe.
And he's not in control of
Hmm.
his
Yeah,
safety.
he sees the Avoxes, like the Avox mutations in the lab,
Mhm.
which I don't think is
My
going to
least
be in the
favorite.
movie in the
Yeah.
same way, unfortunately, from what we've seen. But that is such a terrible but really cool moment in the book.
The humans with talons for fingers, gills in their chest,
Yeah, it
only to
says
find out
something
that they're
about
Avoxes.
that they're like calling out to him or something
Mhm.
like that. Oh my gosh.
That would make it
Yeah,
rated
they're
R
very
definitely.
alive. Yeah.
My favorite line in chapter 8 is how Corio references that he's dealing with a lunatic with Dr. Gall. He like knows that she's a lunatic.
It's so funny how like up and down he goes with her
Mhm.
because earlier in the book he mentions how he kind of gets a thrill seeing her because I guess he knows that she sees something in him for the future, but then he's very scared of her with what happens with
Mhm.
Clemencia.
It's almost like he kind of has this like rose-colored glasses on when he sees them, and he has like this lens of safety in a sense that has been untouched since the dark days, and now he realizes that there are consequences to lying. For me, that whole lesson was lying and telling the truth, and it just makes me think of Catching Fire, when he wants Katniss to tell the truth and Mockingjay for Katniss to tell the truth. I feel like that's like his first lesson from Dr. Gall, which is kind of creepy.
Yeah, I love that parallel to the original series.
And then Clemencia's in the hospital, but it's so creepy because they say that Clemencia's family can't come visit her, but they don't know that, and they can't go visit her. So they don't, like, nobody knows what's going on with Clemencia, which I'm so curious to see how. I think we're all feeling that way, how they'll do that in the movie.
Because we haven't seen a whole lot from that. Just kind of
Mhm.
her looking at the snakes and her reaching the hand in, but nothing about the aftermath.
And then one of my favorite parts about all of the world building of the games, because we get a lot of creation and ideas for the Hunger Games in part one, is Lucy Gray coming up with an ally, having an ally in Jessup.
Hmm.
I really like that because Coriolanus accidentally, I guess, doesn't mean to, but brings her the crackers from the hospital, and she takes two and then takes two for Jessup. And I think it's so fascinating how he's like, why would you have an ally? And then he's like, oh. And he had been counting her out of the games completely the whole time because all she can do is sing and perform. So there's no way that she can win. And I think it was in chapter 2, they referenced like Sejanus getting the pick of the litter, referring again to that animal idea. But I love the creation of allies by Lucy Gray. I think it's like the only good part, like the only good creation for the games, because it
Mm.
creates like a sense of friendship and a
Or
sense of
hope
like
for the
companionship.
tributes. That
Mm-hmm.
is something that Snow would want to be a part of the games because he does want the tributes to be hopeful, and with that, the districts to be hopeful that they might have a victor returning home.
It's kind of sad to me though that it's the tributes using and coming up with these ideas
Mhm.
that like Lucy Gray coming
Well,
up
I
with
feel
this
like
idea.
Snow, he can't be a true ally himself. So that's not
Mhm.
something that would cross his mind that he could come up with to then implement into the games.
Another part from part one that I really like, that I think is sad, is Lucy Gray comes up with the idea that you need to protect your family and protect those that matter to you, or else they'll be used against you in the future, which is just so painful that Lucy Gray
Yeah.
comes up with that.
Corio's
Yeah.
like, huh, yeah, let me file that away. Good idea.
Yeah. It's like the question, who cares about you most in the world? Who cares about you? And then let's hurt them.
So who
So
can we go after if you misbehave?
and then I guess to kind of wrap things up with chapters 9 and 10, they're touring the arena and the arena explodes.
Which is
Another great chapter
supposedly
finale.
rebels, but
Hmm.
plot point that's dropped a little bit because we don't really ever find out, but I think it's kind of implied that it's Dr. Gall.
If we think of it as it being planted, this is a whole nother level of manipulation and game making that we have never seen, because it's all spectacle for people to interact with and see. The world explodes, and what happens? People flee, a bunch of tributes flee, and Lucy Gray tries to flee for a second. I think that's her
She
iconic
thinks
moment.
about it, I think. She
Mm-hmm.
she weighs the options and kind of like takes control a little bit in that moment, deciding in what way she can of what her fate
Mm-hmm.
is going to be, what her next move is going to be, and she ends up saving Coriolanus.
Saving his life in that moment. Think about how Panem history would have changed in that moment
Oh no.
had Lucy Gray just turned and,
Would Dr. Gall
took.
have found, somebody else worthy of taking her place?
I always think about how monumental that moment is right then and there with Lucy Gray. I just think about, girl, that is it right there. And then finally, I overlooked this the first time I read it, but chapter 10, the end of part one, ends with Lucy Gray glanced around the room, taking in her wounded competitors. Then she looked him in the eye, and impatience tinged her voice. You could start by thinking, I could actually win. Dun, 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 which made it into the trailer,
Hmm.
and which made me realize, oh, yeah, this is like a big line, actually. So that's where we end up with part one, the mentor. So I guess, what are some of the standout moments for you?
I think at the beginning, one of the biggest things that stood out was just how not well off Snow and his family was. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
being introduced to Snow being poor. Like, I don't know, that just never before this book came out crossed my mind as something that would be true or part of his past. So, getting all of that information in the beginning was just something that really stood out and still stands out every time I read it. Like the flashback scenes, especially like what he had to go through in Tigris as a child. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah, a big point is the Nero Price moment, which is when he was a child, which it's him and Tigers in the movie are children, and then they see him cut the leg off of his dead maid. They've said that's going to be the opening scene
Opening
of,
scene, yeah.
but I think it's so interesting how they start with the dark days and actually give us a piece of the dark days. And there is a lot of flashback to the dark days in part
Hmm.
one, I would say.
Yeah, and not just that moment, but later, I think when the bomb goes off in the arena, right? Then they talk
Mhm.
about bomb time, and he flashes back to how he felt, like frozen in those moments. And that's what
Mhm.
happens kind of in real time.
I think one of my favorite parts is the relationship between Lysistrata and Jessup and how that kind of
Mm,
starts to form. We'll talk more about that in part two, but especially I think the relationship between Jessup and Lucy Gray and seeing their allyship and then how that affects Corio and Lysistrata's relationship. So I hope that Lysistrata makes a big appearance or for her character in the movie. Another part that I love and that I know we have the focus on Lucky Flickerman, but I literally had a dream about Lepidus Malmsey last night.
what?
I'm like,
Holly, what?
because I've been reading, like having to go back and reread this, I was like just thinking of Lepidus Malmsey, and I'm like, okay, here's our man that we have because we really have not too much focus on Lucky at all. Like he hasn't become host of the Hunger Games at this point. That's kind of fun is to see a different person in that news
Yeah,
sort of way.
which is probably a character we're gonna completely forget about post movie.
I know that's gonna be the
It's like one of
match.
those characters. It
Yeah.
kind of gets erased from canon a little bit. Everyone forgets about.
The Madge of Ballad. And then we also start to see Lucy Gray and Corio's relationship kind of blossom into something else. It's
Hmm.
more of a romance, and more so chapters 9 and 10 is where we start to feel feelings. But prior to that, there hadn't been much of a
I
focus on that.
really like how in chapter 4 they kind of become a team
Mhm.
immediately, and they become a team based on their shared like ability at showmanship and manipulation. And I just love that that's the foundation, like what first initially bonds them is
Mhm.
that moment in the zoo where they have to be fake together,
Yeah.
which I just think is so cool, and I like can't wait to see that on film. I love that line, the she's on stage, you're on stage, this is the show. And like
Mhm.
that's where it starts. The two of them kind of teaming up and just doing what they have to do together to make it further.
Which I love that new promo that they're focusing on them as a team. I think it's more like Team Lucy Gray and Team Choreo is how they should be marketing it because we're Team Lucy Gray, like everyone's Lucy Gray. Choreo is even Team Lucy
Hmm.
Gray. So I love to see them like link up and have that trust with one another, which I think is so interesting because when they go in to actually talk to their tributes, the mentors go in, the tributes don't really see a reason in interacting. Like most of them spend their time crying or like upset, like physically upset and unable to like actually talk to their mentor. Like, why would you want to try? Like, there's nothing in it for you. And so, because of that, we see the games evolving again
Hmm.
naturally.
I love that they're keeping that moment in. I love how much
Mm-hmm.
she's like flirting with him in that scene and how it kind of
Yeah.
like flusters him. And then one of my favorite parts in the book, I don't know why it's just such a visual moment, is when the mentors are on the balcony and down below the tributes come in and like have this moment of silence where they're looking at each other, the visual representation of the two separate classes and like how much higher and like better off the capital students are than down below. the tributes are on the ground.
And it's so interesting with Sejanus being from District 2 and having grown up in District 2 and then moved to the capital. That could have been him. Like he could have been Marcus easily. And he mentions that. I think for me, Sejanus's story was never something that was on my radar as much. But during my rereads, and I think getting to see Josh and like more promo, I'm starting to get a little bit more excited about Sejanus's character. And less kind of like weirded out by how intense he is.
I just really hope that they build up his character well, put a lot into that character in the film so that I hate to say payoff, but so the emotional payoff pans out
Mm-hmm.
well for what happens
Mm-hmm.
to him at the end.
Yeah, which we'll get to in part 3, especially. I think another interesting theme or idea is people's relationship to children, because in chapter 4, Koryo and Dr. Gall are talking about people's relationship with watching things and like what gets them to care. Like, what is the purpose of the Hunger Games, which is what the marketing is doing right now, is looking at that question for fans. And people's love of children seemed a fickle thing, is what Koryo says. And that's a huge part of the Hunger Games. And I think it kind of connects to your last part of it could be anyone, because Koryo could have been born in district whatever, and he could have been there. And are you going to volunteer? It brings up that idea of, yeah, Katniss volunteered for Prim, but we talked about how rare that was as well. So
Yeah,
people's love of children is not
it only goes
unconditional.
so far.
Very interesting that they talk about that along with the animals.
I just love how relatable Suzanne makes Coriolanus in part
Yes.
one. There's so
Mm-hmm.
many lines that are relatable. Like that group project line is one that makes me laugh every
Mm-hmm.
single time, sacrificing for the sake of collaboration, something like that. I don't remember the exact quote,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like you can relate so much to Coriolanus in part one. He's going through a hard time. Like his family has been broken up. They don't have a lot of money. He's, a senior. He's trying to graduate. He is trying to figure out how he's going to pay for university. Like just these things that are so relatable to us. Just Suzanne hitting home the point that we are the capital and like anyone could potentially become what Coriolanus becomes.
But then there's also that underlying, I feel like we know what he becomes. So there's that distrust, and that, especially because it's written from the third person perspective, it really creates that distance between us and Coriolanus. So while it does, I feel like there are parts where he feels sad, there's more parts where I'm like laughing with him. And I feel like it's relatable because I'm like, oh, I'm broke. Like, I totally get it, what it's like. Like, you know what I mean? Like making comments like
Mm-hmm.
that or saying things. Um, it just makes it more, and he's just funny. Like he's a very funny character, and Suzanne writes him in such a way that makes me connect to him, I think, more because of his humor.
I really hope that comes through somehow with Tom. I mean, I have a lot of faith after just seeing that scene, that exchange between Lucy Gray and Coriolanus on the train station. That was just so perfect, perfectly translated from the book.
I know. I think I'm looking forward to it because we've seen a lot of part 1. So I feel like we haven't seen a lot of part 2 in promo for the movie. I feel like
Or part
we've,
three. Yeah,
yeah.
it's been a lot of part one.
So we've definitely seen a lot of this. I feel like one thing was we started to introduce more characters, and we introduced family names like Heavensby and Crane. And I'm like, Corio makes a note that Arachne had traveled extensively through Pan Am. And then it makes me think to like Seneca Crane in that one line with Donald in the movie where he's like to Wes, he's like, have you ever been to the districts? Have you ever been out there?
I know.
And then he's like, no, I haven't. And I'm like, well, your family travels. Like your
Yeah,
family
I
travels.
really wish that they had used that line in the second trailer instead of "It's the things we love most that destroy us." I felt like it was a little repetitive in trailer two.
Mm-hmm.
I would have really liked to hear Donald Sutherland's voice saying like, "Have you been out there? 10, 11," and then like cut to images, splice that in or something. I think that would have been cool because I feel like that line really connects to his past as well. And if you could see them, You would not root for them either, you know?
It's
I'm
just
just
so
making a new
perfect.
trailer here.
I'm mesmerized. On a different note, do you have any least favorite parts? My least favorite part easily was the reaping, the District 12 reaping.
Oh yeah, you're right.
But I think I've
Yeah.
come to respect it more, but at the time it was a big no for me.
It's something that I can't really imagine until I see it, I think.
Hmm.
I have
Yeah.
faith that it's going to be done well, but it's a lot of different emotions all at once.
Mhm.
I felt like I was kind of getting whiplash reading that scene because it's an intense moment, the reaping. We're familiar with that scene from the previous books. And then for the snake situation to happen, and then Lucy
Mhm.
Gray is very upset. She's like almost about to cry. And then Maud Ivory starts to sing, and then Lucy Gray decides to like take it over and
It's
then
like a
sings a
flash
whole on
mob.
song. It's just like a lot.
Yeah. It's like a flash mob. It's like somebody starts
Yeah.
it and then somebody else
But
takes it
honestly,
over.
like I even have trouble with the three finger salute feeling a
Hmm.
little awkward in the movie.
Yeah.
Like everybody doing it. I don't know. So I don't know. I don't know how the scene's gonna pan out in the movie.
It's just weird because the lyrics to me are too on the nose for the
You
song.
can't take anything from me. Nothing
So
you can't take.
it's just like a huge like musical show. Like I would love
See,
that
I
so
just
much.
need to hear the music though. I feel like that's what's really hard, but it helped a lot when fans started creating music like Maya Win and Emma Lee, who I love their
Hmm.
renditions, and like reading it again and listening to their versions helped me a lot because I'm not musical.
Yeah, don't forget Maya and Emma right now. Like this is a time where
Oh
we
yeah.
need
No,
to remember
no
them.
matter how good, well, Sell You for a Song is probably not going to be in the movie. So I will always have Maya Wynn's Sell You for a Song, and that will always be in my heart forever. It's
Yes.
fantastic.
One thing that I really liked was the symbolism of milk. Like this is just me, but like
Oh, like
milk
Dr. Gall's
symbolizes,
cookies and milk?
yeah, cookies and milk, but then also pluribus. He during like all the hard times, they would like a huge item of food that was like very luxurious to them was milk. And milk in the Bible symbolizes abundance. And so
Like
like I
milk and
just
honey. Yeah.
so I just kind of like kept picking up on this idea of milk because then like once you start hearing the word milk in the first part of Ballad, you can't stop hearing it. Like there's like
Hold
three
on.
times where it's
Hold
mentioned.
on. I gotta.
That was like, and I this was some Holly. I was like, wait, you're talking about milk a little bit too much. Maybe I was just
Oh. Better be whole milk.
uncomfortable.
I don't drink
No.
skim milk. No watery milk here. I want that abundant milk.
We want some heavy cream.
So milk is mentioned 23 times.
That's what I'm saying.
What?
Yes. Oh my God. Okay. I thought you were gonna say like twice. No, like that's what I'm saying.
Wow. This should be
So that was one
studied.
thing. I know. I think because then there's a whole part in chapter 2 where she focuses on the actual hunger during the dark days that I think is so fascinating because it talks about like how they hoarding food was illegal, the whole backstory behind pluribus and the food shortages, and then that backstory or that flashback with the grandmam. It's the line by pluribus like, oh no, serious things happen when you run out of this stuff, like something along those lines.
Hmm.
It's the dangerous things that happen once you run out. And then the grandmam kind of it clicks and she realizes like, oh, we don't have food. We are at a different time in our lives with the dark days.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's cool. It's just another genius food insert from Suzanne.
Yeah.
She's good at the hunger. She's good at the food stuff.
Hunger, hunger.
Everyone hungers for something.
And on
Oh
that note,
gosh.
but I think it's just interesting, like some things to look out for while we wait for part two's episode is keeping our eye out on who's the songbird and who is the snake. I feel like Lucy Gray is clearly
Hmm.
putting on a show and knows how to play people. So does she know how to play Snow?
Yeah, I feel like the more times I read the story, the more I'm convinced Lucy Gray is manipulating, like the majority of the time, is a
Mm-hmm.
snake. Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, we're manipulating a future dictator here. So
Yeah.
go Lucy Gray.
Do what you need to do, girl.
Yeah.
Boss it up, queen. And on that note, we are done with part 1, The Mentor. And next week we will go on to part 2, The Prize. So stay tuned for that. And join us for Tribute Talk every Thursday, 6:30 Pacific, 9:30 Eastern.
Mhm.
And get your ballad merch, follow us, hang out with us, and we will see you for episodes every single weekend in October. So we will see you next week with another new episode. Bye.
See ya.